Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I was just checking to see that we had quorum, and also I did receive some emails from some folks who can't make it, so I was just checking my emails. Mr. Samora, at the count, we'll let you live stream. So for everyone to know, we are live streaming and recording this session. We are a Brown Act committee, and so Mr. Zamora is here to support us. We are also, as you notice, we're going to continue to use Google because that helps us with captioning, and we can ensure that we're accessible to the community as well. So Mr. Zamora at 3, 2, and 1. Thank you. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first Local Control Accountability Advisory Committee. First of all, a big thank you. I know this is a big commitment of time and energy, and just a big thank you. I know some folks aren't able to join us this evening, but hopefully with our next meeting, we will be able to get more folks to join. My name is Leti Salinas, and I serve as the Assistant Superintendent of Instructional Services. And I do have to say that I gotta say you are all a big group of committed folks. Our work is almost year long. The wonderful thing about our work is that at the end of this, we actually have a tangible document that comes out of this work. And we are advisory to our Board of Education. Also, please note that we do have 2 trustees who serve on our committee. And so they'll be joining us. And I know we can't, let's see if I've got everybody here. Okay, I'm adjusting my screen so I can see more folks. And they will also be part of our committee. We also have staff that's here. And then who are non-voting members, but then all of you who were either selected by your union. So thank you. Our parents, our community members, and our students who were applied and were selected by our Board of Education. So a big thank you for that work as well. So I wanted to get started with some quick, I'm going to take roll for today. But before we get to roll, I want to share with you is that we also, as part of our work, is that we have public comment. And so if you were watching our board meeting last week, we are now working to be in alignment with the governor's legislative decree as to how public meetings run. We are after October 1st, we will be able to take a live public comment. So we're working as staff to make sure we're able to do that. But for today, we're still under the old regulations, which is that with our public agenda that was posted, we also allowed for public comments to be submitted by email. And so I just checked, it closed at 2:30 today. And at this point, we had no public comment for today. I will say that's pretty rare for us. We typically do have public comment, but we've also just got it started. So there will be plenty of opportunity to hear from the community. And I think for our next meeting, it'll even be stronger because it'll be an opportunity to get some live, either, I'm still working out the kinks. So it'll either be call-in, it might be simultaneous emails that are coming in. And so we're working through that. And today as staff, we met to start to do some of that planning. So as I said, we had no public comment for today. And now I would like to move to the introduction of the members and to take roll. So what I would like to do, and as folks are starting to join us, just a reminder that we are live streaming this and recording. So I'm going to start with, I'm going to call, as somebody keeps saying, the Hollywood Squares. If you're old enough as I am to remember the Hollywood Squares, I see you all on my screen, or the Brady Bunch. I don't know, that might be an older reference, but I'm going to go ahead and call you on. And then if you could please just say what area you're representing, or where your students go to school, or if you're representing your union, or if you're a community member, that would be wonderful. We're going to start with, on my screen, Ms. Anna Schiffer.
Present. I am a parent of a high schooler at Kennedy and a 5th grader at Azevedo. So I represent the Kennedy High School district.
Thank you. Victoria Chan.
Hi, I'm Victoria Chan, and I'm here as a representative from the Fremont Unified District Teachers Association, FETA. I'm their first vice president.
Thank you. Stephen Musto.
Good evening. I'm representing the Fremont School Managers Association, which is our group of school administrators in Fremont.
Thank you. Siddhartha Banerjee.
Good evening. I'm a parent of 3 kids who go to Parkmont Elementary School. So I'm from Washington, Tyndall's area.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ann Dameron.
I'm Anne. I am a school secretary in the elementary level, but I am here representing the Classified School Employees Association, which represents all of our paraeducators and our office and technical employees.
Thank you. Felix Lecter.
Hi, my name is Felix. I represent the Kennedy attendance area, and my son is in 2nd grade at Azaveda. Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda Deng.
Hi, I'm a student representative from Surfboard E, and I also attend Mission San Jose High School.
Thank you. Zion Khan.
Hello, I'm Zion Khan. I'm also a Surfboard E student representative, and I go to Irvington.
Thank you. Prakash Dasat.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I am a parent of high schooler and elementary schooler in Irvington area.
Thank you. Christy Rocha.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Christy Rocha, the Director of Federal and State Programs, and I'm here as staff who works on the LCAP.
Thank you. Yen Chen.
Hi there. My name is Yen Chen. I represent the American High School district area. My daughter goes to Warwick. She's in the 3rd grade.
Wonderful. Thank you. Nancy Pfeiffer.
Hi, thank you. My name is Nancy Pfeiffer. I'm the Associate Superintendent for the district.
Thank you. Jennifer Cho.
Present. I'm a parent representative. I've got a 6th grader at Glenmore.
Thank you. Trustee Vivek Prasad.
Hi, I'm Vivek Prasad, and I represent the board here as one of the 2 board members.
Thank you. Abhay Kulkarni.
Hi, good evening. I represent, I'm a parent of 2 kids going to Mission San Jose schools.
Thank you. Divya Belamkonda.
Hi everyone, I'm Divya. I represent American High area. I have 2 kids in elementary school at Warwick, 3rd and 5th grade. Really nice seeing you all.
Good to see you too. Thank you. And if I missed, I'm not sure if I missed anyone. I don't think so. Okay, and I anticipate some folks may join us as we go on. So the next thing on the agenda is I'm going to have Dr. Rocha give an overview of and an introduction to the LCAAC. I recognize that we have some returning members, and that is fantastic because it's important to have that foundational work. But I also love and appreciate that we have new members. And so in order to kind of level the playing field, and so we all have some very similar understandings, Dr. Rocha is going to give an overview and presentation as to the role of the LCAP and our work this year. And Dr. Rocha, do you want me to share my screen?
Sure, if you don't mind.
So if you would like to get started, I'm trying to figure out if I can get to present mode. My apologies.
Sure. Okay, so good evening, everyone. I'm gonna do kind of an overview of the local control accountability plan. We're gonna talk about the local control funding formula. We're gonna talk about increased and improved services, which is a requirement within the LCAP. look at timeline, and we're going to look at the 8 indicators, how they align to our LCAP plan. So those are just kind of our objectives. So if we go to the next slide, you're going to hear interchangeably local control funding formula. That is what we refer to as LCFF, and those are essentially funding that we receive from the state. So what you'll see on the left-hand side is the general fund, or referred to as the base grant. And so every district in California receives this base grant or general fund, and that helps for the operations of the district. So what you'll see is that this is based on attendance and other factors, and every student generates funding for that, and that helps basically to run the day-to-day operations within our district. So staffing, building costs, instructional materials, items like that. Within LCFF, also districts receive supplemental grant. Supplemental grant is based on the number of students who are low income, English learners, foster and homeless youth. And so every district, what we refer to them as unduplicated students, and I don't know why the state referred to it as that, but that is the terminology. And so what happens is that every district will certify their basically demographic data, and we will determine what the percentage is. And based on that percentage of students, then we receive additional funding on top of the general or the base grant fund. And that money is intended to increase or improve services for these 4 groups of students. Another portion of the local control funding formula, so it's almost kind of stacked. So you have your base grant, your supplemental, and then on top of that is concentration grant. I will caveat that Fremont does not receive this, but just so you have an understanding of how LCFF works. This is for districts who have 55% or more of what we call unduplicated students. So again, of those 4 groups, low income, English learner, foster and homeless youth. As you'll see in the notes, we do not receive the concentration grant, but that is part of the LCFF calculation, right? So in our case, we receive the general or the base grant, and then in addition to that is the supplemental. So that is is the process of how the funding that we receive for LCAP. So if you want to go to the next. So what is an LCAP? So an LCAP is basically our vision. It's our strategic plan. It is a 3-year plan that really articulates what are our initiatives, what are our priorities, and it is a public document. I think our current one is over 200 pages. And so every district in California is required to develop an LCAP, and then it has to be public facing. So that is something that the board will see in the springtime, and there's a lot of input with our educational partners around developing that LCAP. And so what you'll see within the LCAP are our goals and actions. What are the services we intend to provide, and any expenditures, and then data. What does the data say? Have we seen positive outcomes? What are the metrics around all of those goals and actions? So the intent is really around continuous improvement. We go to the next slide. So the intent of the LCAP, again, is that it communicates with all parties, our educational partners, and it really defines how the district, and the LEA is a district, how we plan to operationalize equity, because again, going back to the intent of LCAP, looking at 4 student groups and identifying our priorities within this 3-year plan. So again, who is LCAP for? It is intended for English learners, socially, economically disadvantaged students, foster youth, and homeless youth. The supplemental funds that we receive, they're intended to principally support our unduplicated students. So we need to demonstrate year after year how we're improving or increasing services for these 4 particular groups. And so some of you might wonder, why is it that it's the state has identified these 4 student groups? And the historical component, or the reason why, is because when LCFF was developed, the intent was to support student groups that have historically had some challenges in our educational system. And so that is why we see these 4 student groups that are called out in particularly around the LCAP, and that is how we generate the funds. So going back to unduplicated, to give you an example, say for example, I am a student and I'm an English learner, and I'm also considered socially, economically disadvantaged. The reason why they use the term unduplicated is that even though I fall in those 2 of the 4 buckets per se, the district would only receive that additional funding for me one time because I fall in that group, so I don't get additional funding because I'm in those other categories or in those student groups. So that sometimes is a question that comes up. It's unduplicated because it's only get that additional funding one time, regardless if you belong in all 4 of the groups or all 3 of the groups. It's just the one additional funding that we receive. So if we go to increased and improved services requirements, so this comes directly from Ed Code. And essentially what it is that within the LCAP, we have to demonstrate that how we are increasing or improving services to our unduplicated students. So there are specific prompts, there are specific sections within the LCAP. When you look at the goals and expenditures, they will ask you specifically, is this considered something that you're improving services? So let me give you an example. If, for say, we were going to identify a curriculum that we intended to use for all students to improve social emotional well-being, let's say, for example, that would not be considered a increased or improved services because that is something that is happening across the board. An example of an increased or improved services would be, say we are hiring a counselor that is going to dedicatedly work with our homeless and foster youth. That would be an example of increased and improved services. So we have to constantly, within the LCAP, describe and note if it is improving or increased services. And again, there are prompts and narratives that we have to basically obey to demonstrate that process. So if we go to the next slide, please. So the developing of an LCAP. So it is a year-long process. So thank you, all of you, for being with us because it is a year-long process. So how the process works is that we, every year, need to gather our educational partners' feedback. So how do we do that? We do that in various modes and ways. For example, we do surveys, we have in-person meetings, we talk to different committees and groups. And what the real purpose of that is to gather input and feedback from our community to see what are the priorities, what is it that they're seeing that we need to identify. We look at data. We are a data-driven committee and process as to how are our students progressing, not only academically, but social, emotionally, and behaviorally, and look at how are there things that we need to consider, or are there things that might be something that would improve the outcomes for students. And so we are constantly gathering input our community to see what is it that they're seeing based on the data, based on their experiences, to help drive the process of developing the LCAP. Sorry, it's really small, so I'm trying to see the next component. From there, we analyze and look at the data. So again, we are a data-driven committee looking at what does the data tell us. Mr. Musta will give us lots of information, lots of examples, looking at our metrics from the previous LCAP to determine okay, is this effective expenditure? Are we hitting the mark? Do we need to readjust? Do we need to look at other things? And so we're analyzing the data and our measurable outcomes. Then what will happen is we will then start to draft and look at potential things that we would want to add to the LCAP. The advisory committee, so this LCAAC committee is considered an advisory committee. So they would support, help us with that, looking at what the feedback from the community is and start to then develop a draft. A draft would then be developed with goals and actions. And then again, working with our different educational partners, going through DLAC, which is our District English Language Advisory Committee for feedback and input. And as that process, the cyclical process happens, once we then have a solid draft plan, we would then have it would go to the board for a public meeting, again, for more feedback from our community, and then finally the approval of the LCAP. So again, it is really a years-long process to develop it from start to finish. And so what you'll see is our timeline. And what I just highlighted were the major milestones. This is not inclusive of everything, every single detail that happens with the development of an LCAP. But one thing that we know that has changed this year for some of our members who've been with us or with me for this 7-year journey is that there is a new component this year of a one-time LCAP supplemental document. And so that is something new for our members who've been around. We have never had to do that, but that was something that was passed recently in response to the pandemic and all of the different changes that have happened. So February 25th, we will have to present to the board a one-time LCAP supplemental, which includes mid-year data and expenditures. And what this really is to highlight what we've done and what we've been able to accomplish thus far in February. It happened then in April. We always work very closely with Alameda County Office of Ed. They also have to approve our LCAP. So we will have to submit our first draft to Alameda County Office of Ed in April. And I don't have the specific date because they let us know, but it always happens sometime in April when we would have to do that. June 1st, again, one of those major milestones is that's when we have to hold our public hearing. So the draft would have been developed and going into its final approval stages. So before we do that, we have to hold this public hearing. We do know that it will be June 1st, and that is when we can invite public comment on the actual draft, putting all the pieces together. And then June 22nd, the board will adopt the district LCAP. And again, that is something that is required, that all districts must have their board to approve their LCAP. Within that, after the board approves that, within 5 days, we have to submit our LCAP to the county office. And in our case, it's Alameda County Office of Ed. And they also approve our LCAP. And so they have to basically notify us no later than September 15th if they approve our LCAP. And if there's any questions, they will respond to us and let us know if there's any concerns, because part of legislation is, again, the county office is one of the final approvals of the LCAP documents. Next. So we have 4 goals within our LCAP, and they're, as you're going to see, they're somewhat broad, but there is an alignment to that based on the 8 state priorities. So the state has identified that each district is required to make sure that whatever their goals are, and you'll see every district is different. We have 4 goals. I don't know this to be true, but let's just say Newark, who's across the way, might have 5 goals, and Union City or New Haven Unified might have 3 goals. So it's a local control or a local choice of how many goals are established. But one thing that is for certain is that all of the districts, regardless of how many goals they have, they must be aligned to these 8 state priorities. So with that being said, you'll see that the 8 state priorities are basic services, state standards. We have parent involvement, pupil achievement, pupil engagement, school climate, course access, and other student outcomes. And so what you'll see is basically I've outlined our different goals. So with goal 1 for Fremont Unified, our goal is to provide an educational environment that is conducive to learning. So you'll see that there are many actions within that large overall goal, but again, how they align to those 8 state priorities. So that would be goal 1. Goal 2 is around increasing the academic achievement for all students. Again, we have 2 state priorities that are aligned to our goal. Goal 3, implement strategies to involve students in their learning and interventions to eliminate barriers to success. And again, identifying those 2 state priorities. And then our last goal 4 is around establishing partners with our families and community to increase academic success. So again, one thing, if you're curious, every district has different goals and actions because again, that is based on the feedback that you receive from your community. And so our priorities might look very different than someone else, but the one common thread or the one common piece that weaves us all is that every district is required to develop an LCAP and work with their school community in the development of that. Next, please. So just to define those 8 state priorities, because some of them are not so intuitive. When we look at state priority 1, what we're looking at is credentials of teachers, instructional materials, and looking at facilities. Priority 2 is around the implementation of our state board approved standards. So there's numerous standards. Many of us are familiar with that: English language arts, mathematics, English language development, health, social studies, NGSS, world language. Pretty much every course has state standards that we need to abide by. We go to the next one around access of broad course of study. That is looking at particular grades and particular standards within that. Standard 3 is around parent engagement. Priority 6 is around school climate. And then other district selected indicators that would support those 8 state priorities. So it can look very different. And go to the next slide, please. And so the next piece is around, so now that we know that we have these 8 state priorities, how do we measure, how do we see that districts and schools are making progress? And so some of you might be familiar with the California dashboard. The dashboard is a way to measure how districts and schools are doing. And so every district has a dashboard that pertains to them and how their student outcomes, and the same thing would be at school sites. So we have several indicators, and some apply just to secondary or secondary, so 6th, 7th to 12th grade, and then some might just apply to elementary. So the academic indicator is one that would apply to all levels in Fremont Unified, including the district. And so when they're looking at the academic indicator, what they're looking at essentially is CASP or SBAC scores. And that is our state assessment that students take in the spring in English language arts and mathematics. One thing to note that it is not given to all grades. It's only in grades 3 through 8 and 11th grade, and that is determined by the state. So that is what the state has determined. The other indicator that we have, which is fairly new, is the English Learner Progress Indicator. And that again is an indicator solely for English learners based on how they do on the LCAAC, which is the state assessment of language acquisition and how students are progressing. And so the English learner progress indicator, again, would be something that you would see not only at the district level, but also at the school level and all levels. Suspension and expulsion rates, that is something that is an indicator as well. That is the one indicator that you don't want to see go up. You actually want it to go down. And we'll do a more extensive training on that. But again, that is something that applies to all levels, including the district, around priorities from the state. The college and career indicator, this only applies at the high school level. And so the college career indicator is looking at several factors. And so we would not see this indicator if we were looking at, say, Parkmont, for example, an elementary, or even Walters Junior High. It only applies to high school. And so there's several factors. It's a very complex indicator of how they determine how students are basically college and career ready. And so you'll see, excuse me, they utilize the 11th grade CAS for SBAC results on ELA and math. They're looking at A to G completion, AP scores, dual enrollment, state seal of biliteracy. So there's many factors to determine that. High school graduation. Again, that is an indicator that only applies to the high school level. And again, just identifying how this high school and then applies to us as a district, what is our graduation rate? And within the dashboard, you can go even more in depth to look at how particular student groups did. It gives you a lot of information. And then the last one is the chronic absenteeism indicator. And that, again, does not apply to high school, but it applies to basically elementary and junior high. And so what the state has identified is a real need to ensure that students are in school, because there's a lot of data that shows that students who are persistently out of school are losing instruction, which then has huge impacts on how they do not only academically, but social emotionally as well. So that is an indicator that we look at, that we monitor to ensure that our students are in school and are accessing the instructional program that we provide. Next. So within the indicators, so those are the state indicators that they basically take our information and they do the calculations. And so that is in a public facing in the dashboard that is available for anybody to view. There are other components, and these are the local indicators. And these are performed by the district. And again, every district in California is required to do this. And so there are particular rubrics and particular items that the state is looking for. We have to present this at a board meeting to demonstrate how we determine that. There are only 3 results that you can essentially through the rubrics have, and that's either not met or not met for 2 years or more. I'm happy to report that when we did the local indicators, we met all of those. Mr. Musto does that presentation to the board. Again, is something that we will take in one of our board meetings and to share with our community how we determined and evaluated those local indicators. Next. So here is an example of the dashboard. What you'll see right now is there's not a lot of information because the dashboard was suspended due to COVID-19. And I don't know if you can see that, but it does say that. But generally on the dashboard, you will be able to look at all districts, not just Fremont, and all schools. So not just schools in Fremont Unified, but outside of Fremont Unified. And so they give you district details. It tells you the enrollment, the number of, and you'll see the percentage of socially economically disadvantaged. In this case, for 2020, we had 20%. English learners was 12.6%, and foster youth was 0.1%. Generally, where we are at as a district, if you look at all of those student groups that incorporate as our unduplicated, we were currently at 26%, but we will be doing the calculation very soon, as we will have to do what we call Seabeds Day, where we will have to report our demographic data and certify that to the state level. And so that number could potentially go up or down once we certify that demographic data. But just wanted to show all of you what the dashboard looks like. But normally we'd have more information. It's just due to the suspension. So to close up before I take any questions is the LCAP documents. And so there's lots of documents within the LCAP. Elements within the LCAP is the budget overview for parents template. That is part of the adoption process, the public hearing and the adoption by the board. So that is a template and document for parents who are able to take a look at and review how the amount of money that we receive and the expenditures around unduplicated and other services. So that is that document that is there. The one in the middle is the actual LCAP, and that's just a quick one-pager of what you'll see, where in each goal, you will have to give general information, reflect on successes, any modification that might need to be made, and then highlights. And then the other document to the right, the last is where we include the metrics, where we indicate improved or increased services. So I invite you to take a look at it. Like I said, it's a very large document, but there are lots of components within LCAP, the actual document, that are required when we go for adoption. And I believe that is the end of the presentation.
Great, thank you. So now would be a time, and thank you, Mr. Musa, for putting that in the link in the chat. We have a hand up, Divya.
Hey, Christy. So this link, is it open for everyone? So these documents, are they open for the public?
The actual LCAP?
Yes, please. So these 3 documents
Yes.
that you said.
It is. It's open. I can, once I take any other questions, I can add the link into the chat, but it's on our website. So you can access the LCAP, the entirety on our website, but I'll add it to the
I think it's in there
chat.
already. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was shared already. Actually, I joined last year, but I wasn't there for the initial presentation. So today's presentation was really good, that I was able to understand what this group is fully about. Over the meetings, I was trying to understand some of these things and get used to that, right? So for the new members who are going to join, it would be great if this could be put as a training document or some location where we can go back and keep looking back at these, so that even for me, after 1 year, if I want to go back and check what is going to come in the next months, I can go back and refer to these documents, right? So if there is a constant link which is there, maybe I could bookmark it and check, and similar things could be shared with others too.
Sure, we can absolutely do that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Siddhartha?
Hi, thank you. Quick question: is this how is this linked to the funding we get from the state? I think that's the main question. Thanks.
So, and I will have our associate superintendent also chime in if she would like to clarify around that. So we receive the base grant or the general fund funds, and that is based on attendance or ADA. And that is a calculation that is done, and basically students' presence, which generates the operations, right? The day-to-day operating of the district. we receive additional money, which is considered supplemental, and it's they refer to it as the supplemental grant, and that is based on students who are who fall under English learners, foster, homeless youth, or are considered low income. And so we determine that based on different demographic data. We then have to certify that data with the state, which then tells us what our percentage is. And then that is how we get this additional funding on top of our base grant, which is supplemental. And that's how we develop this budget based on that number.
And if I may just add that the local control accountability plan really focuses on that additional funding that comes in and how it serves the students that generated the funding. So when we talk about unduplicated count is because there could be one student that has a high poverty level. That student can also be homeless. That student can potentially also be English language learner. So instead of counting them 3 times, they're only counted once. But and there's a very and the students that meet that criteria are identified through different through the test that takes place, so that we can determine their English language proficiency. So each of these criteria have an evaluation that the student or the student's information goes through to determine if they qualify or not. Then the student generates those revenues. And the important task of this group is to look at those students, look at their needs, and develop a plan that addresses those needs, right? Our English language learners, which their English proficiency is very, very low. What can we do for those students that have that need? And this funding has a discretion for additional services for students that have need for technology because they can't afford to have technology access to the internet. And the group has already established what these funds are going to be used for. But the funding source is generated by these students that are identified. And Dr. Rocha always does a really good job at describing this. This is not an easy task. Having to document all this information in a 300-page document is not easy. So I'm very grateful that she takes this on for us, and she absolutely does a great job with your help.
Thank you. And I see another hand, Annie Hay.
Yes, hi. Thanks, Christia, for the great presentation. This is very, very helpful, especially for parents just joined the committee. This is fantastic. Appreciate it. I have 2 questions after hearing this presentation. The first question is, again, overall budget. You had a general fund and you have supplemental grant, right? So I'm just wondering, as far as dollar amount or percentage wise, what is a percentage? Let's say we received 100%, general fund is 670 or supplemental grant is whatever percentage. If you can give just a brave number, that'll give us idea of the ballpark, the percentage wise. And the second question is really about English learner. I'm curious as far as what has been done so far in the past many years. You guys have been doing a great job as far as helping the English learner, either at a grade level or what measure was taking place. I'll be interested to learn. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy, would you like to answer that, or would you like me to about the percentage?
So the district receives in unrestricted general fund local control funding formula 329,751,466. Within that $329 million is the local control accountability plan portion for our unduplicated count students. And our percentage, I think it's less than 29% of our student population is unduplicated. So the one of the things that's important to mention is that the local control funding formula is one pot of, it's one pie. And within that pie, there's a slice for supplemental students. So although we see it as additional funding, and that is correct, it is still within that local control funding formula. So if the slice of the pie gets greater for our supplemental students, the pie doesn't get bigger. It's the same pie. The slice just gets bigger for our supplemental students. And I think that's important to be aware of.
That's great. Thank you. That's really helpful for us to understand. I guess the second question is about what has been done as far as helping English learners. Thank you.
I can speak to that. So we have several actions within the LCAP to support our English learners. So I'll just give you some of the examples. We have ELD specialists at our school, some of our elementary school sites where the number of English learners is very high. And they are able to do a lot of direct services for our English learners. Serving students who are considered newcomers, so newly arrived to the U.S. educational system, English learners who've been in the ELD program for some time, and working with them on language acquisition. And in addition to that, our long-term English learners or potentially long-term English learners whose students who've been in the EL program for 5 or more years, and their specific needs are a little bit different. And so these ELD specialists are deployed at school sites to not only work direct services for students, but in addition to that, work with parents, do a lot of family workshops and outreach to families. In addition to that, do professional development and support the overall development of the ELD program. At the secondary level, we have additional sections or courses that we offer for newcomers and long-term English learners. So that is also within goals and actions within the LCAP. And so the needs at the secondary are a little bit different. So we're able to offer a course that really provides that support for newcomers who need have different needs than someone who's been a long-term English learner. Some of the other things is we have teacher leaders or liaisons at each of our sites that come for training, and we discuss various things around serving English learners. We have professional development for staff around language acquisition and best practices for English learners. We also have an expenditure around the immersion program for both Spanish and Mandarin immersion that has a large percentage of English learners, so that we're helping to basically support them with language acquisition as well. So those are just some that I can think of off the top of my head, but there are much more within the document.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I see a hand, Trustee Jones.
Yes, thank you. I apologize for being late. I had a meeting that ran late, so I was here a little bit late, and I'm hoping my question I'm hoping this isn't repeated somewhere in the presentation portion that I missed. With the question that went to the percentage of the budget that is the supplemental grant, while we have 26% of our students that fall into that category, if I understood the question, and I'm looking at my notes, and somebody should check my math. I never trust my math this late in the day when I've had a busy day. But if our overall budget is $329.7 million approximately, and the supplemental grant is $16.3 million approximately, which I think is correct, I think that's about 5% of the total budget. If anybody wants to check my math, if that makes sense.
That's right, Trustee Jones.
Okay, and so my question, and I've been on this committee and on the board for a little while, and I still learn things every time I serve on a committee, especially this one. So my question is, because we get the base grant for those students, and then we get additional funds for those students. That's the supplemental grant. And it's that, is it just that portion of the additional funds we get for those students that this committee advises on? Okay, so it's not the entire base grant plus the supplemental grant in total that we're talking about. It's just those supplemental funds. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Our charge is the supplemental funds. So that runs anywhere between 15 and 60 million within my 7 years in this role. So it does change year to year, but that it runs around that.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Pause. Oh, great, wonderful. Siddhartha?
Hi, thank you very much. Sorry, I didn't want to take too much time. So I was quick. I was wondering about this. Thank you very much for the presentation. You did very well. I really appreciate it. How's the special education funding formula? Is it included within the supplemental, or is it a separate part of funding that comes from other sources? Thank you.
Yeah, so it is a separate funding. There may be some students who, as we talk about the unduplicated, who may also be English learners but participate in the special education program. But that funding is completely separate. We certainly do a contribution as a district though to the needs. And I don't know if Nancy wants to give any more details about the special ed budget, but it is definitely distinct from this work.
Yes, the special ed funding that comes in is usually not sufficient to cover the cost of all the needs of our students. And so when we look at the funding that we get from the state and federal funding, it's considered restricted money and it's not part of the base we were just talking about, right? So there's a funding source for that. However, it is never enough to cover the cost of the program. So the base funding that we receive makes a contribution to that, to the special ed program so that we can provide the services that our students need.
Thank you for that. And I saw Trustee Prasad, I think I saw your hand. Did you want to say something?
I was just going to comment on what everybody has said. Dr. Rocha did a very good presentation. So for me, I'm still a rookie here, right? So this helped me understand the picture much better. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Jennifer Cho?
Yes, I'm new to this committee, so I have a question about the priorities from past cycles and some of the ways that you're operationalizing equity. Do you see the priorities kind of carry over from year to year because they're more long-term, or do they, how much movement is there year to year depending on what the needs are? Thank you.
I would say both. There are some things that have carried over. We have heard very loud and clear from our community around the needs to address social, emotional, and mental health. So for example, years past, we started with elementary counselors. We only had counselors at the secondary level. And then we started to add elementary counselors. And as the years have progressed, we've had, we were then very fortunate to have elementary counselors. Then last year we expanded that so that certain sites who have a large unduplicated counts will now have a full-time counselor, because it started where they were split between two sites. In addition to that, as the needs have progressed, or we've heard from our community, we've now added social workers. So as you can see, there was a priority, and then it kind of expands as we get data and what we hear from the community. So that's just one example, but to a short version, it's both.
And I can add that, going back to the metrics and the data, and, I think very good questions that we'll be looking at and hopefully unpacking is looking at survey results from our community, but then also looking at some of the outcomes or the results, and just really looking at the efficacy of some of our initiatives. That will be some of our discussions. I think another example is with our English language development teachers. What we also heard from the communities that they really appreciate the direct service, where these are teachers who are directly working with English learners. And we also know that language takes time to acquire. And so having that commitment, I know, wonderful for Fremont. I'm not new anymore, but I was new last year. And what I appreciated about looking at and reviewing our LCAP is that there is definitely a commitment to ensuring we're expanding services for English learners, for our unhoused youth, that will be in that need. And so when we see our direct services to students, that's a big plus. And then when we also look at professional development, I think last year, just because of the pandemic, it was just very difficult to really take on something else. But what we recognized was that our staff still needed support with professional development. So this year, we're seeing ourselves revisit a lot of the work. And I think also to the credit of our board and the trustees, really solidifying that those recommendations that this body moves forward, I think really is a testament to what Fremont really values. So I see a hand from Yen Chen.
I think it's important for all the new members, just like me. I've been on here for a little while, a couple years, but I think the programs and the questions that we have helps to guide the district. One of the things that we look at is, like, for example, the social economically disadvantaged. The COVID, really brought attention to internet and computers. And if someone was socially economically disadvantaged, how many of them really didn't have that equipment? And the district having to address those issues. And some of that came from this committee and other committees too, and even board members directly. But I think for us to be vigilant about all the things that are being presented helps guide the district, especially like English learners. One of the things I brought up, I think it was last year, was what was the criteria for those that are in the program. Is there a higher standard than what the state might have? We kind of heard a little bit from Christine Rocha about being an English learner more than 5 years. What does that really mean? So for us as a committee, we might have to kind of poke around that particular issue and say, should we basically have a higher standard, or can we get students off of that, earlier, by the use of the resources that come from the funding that we get. So that's just something to share a little bit with the folks. But my main question right now is the social economic, we have 20%. Where does that number come from? I know before, people apply for, they're disadvantaged, so they basically want to apply for the free lunch, right? That's an economic program. And so before, we would actually get some hard data by the applications that we get. But going forward, how do we know who's disadvantaged? I think that's maybe something that this committee can kind of poke around and see, is the data coming from a macro level, or is it coming from, internally? And we actually have really good data on that. It's a big chunk, 20%. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have, I'm going to ask Dr. Rocha maybe give a little bit about what we've done in the past. And then Nancy, could you give a little bit about what the shift we had to do with adjusted income verification? Yeah, so the past and then the present. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The past was very simple in the sense that families, as you mentioned, Yen, that they would apply through the lunch program, and there was an application, and then they would qualify for either free or reduced. And so that was our indicator, or how we determine the percentage of families who would be considered. And there's other factors, but that was one of the main factors to determine low income. So that was the past, and I'll pass the baton to the present.
And so that worked well in that the families who had a need understood that in order for their child to qualify for a free or reduced meal, they needed to complete this form, right? Well, as you all know, this year we are no longer, there is no fee for lunch meals. All students are eating at no cost to them. So therefore, the need for this application is no longer there for the purpose of determining if a student qualifies for a free or reduced meal. However, in order for the district to continue to establish poverty level, we need to have our parents complete what's called an alternative income form. And that's becoming challenging. And the reason why it's challenging is because now there isn't a motivation for parents to have to complete the form because their student is eating at no cost. And where that's detrimental to us is that if we had last year 9,200 students that were identified as unduplicated, and a percentage of that was our students that were low income students, if our numbers of English language learners or number of students that are low income goes down because of this lack of applications, so will the supplemental funding that will come for us to provide additional services. So we've started a campaign. There's been communication sent out to parents. We have about 17,000 families that have not completed this document. And so we've reached out to the 17,000 families. We only got 500 responses. We reached out again this week, and we have an additional 160 responses, I believe. Well, that's not reaching the numbers. So we're going to have to take it a step further and see if our staff at the school sites can help us reach out to these families, make phone calls, and perhaps help us get that information that we need to establish the poverty level. I know Margaret is looking at me like, excuse me, that hasn't been decided. I don't know what else to do because the impact to our students when it comes to this funding that is for supplemental services is going to be impacted by our decline in numbers. And as it is, the district's impacted by the decline in enrollment. So if our numbers also decline in unduplicated count, so will the money that is coming towards supplemental, but it will also impact our Title I, the federal programs, because that helps us make that determination as well. And as you know, Title I is funding that we hand out to the schools that serves particular students. And so there's a bit of an anxiety on my level, and we have a team here at the district office that's been working diligently at sending out communications and trying to reach out to these families. But all of our families need to help us by completing the form. And if they don't qualify, that's fine, but at least we know that all of our families complete it. So there's a big effort that's going to have to be made, continuous effort that's going to have to be made to see if we can have our parents help us by completing the forms.
Thank you. And I see Felix.
Hi, Nancy. I work as a crossing guard as a volunteer 2 times a day, 5 times a week. And about 100 people walk past me in 10 minutes. What is this form called, please?
It's called an alternative income form. It's on our webpage, but we can certainly get it to you. Dr. Rocha, do you have Mr. Lechner's contact information, and we can send it to him?
Do you want me to hand out in paper, or should I just remind people to fill it out?
You can certainly, it's the alternative income form, and it's on our webpage. We will send you at least one of them so you see what it looks like and the information of where to find it on our webpage in case you can share that information with parents who cross. Now, don't get into an accident or anything like that, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Siddhartha?
Thank you very much. I hear you. So I was wondering if we have reached out to PTA to help bridge this gap. If not, how can we as a parent in this committee can help on that? My second, maybe it's a wild idea, but is it possible to account from the other way around, where when the school lunch is served, we account for the number from there and a bunch of back calculation, but I leave it up to you guys to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. Let's see. Oh, yes, Chen.
Yeah, I think this is just an example of, all as parents being able to come up with some ideas and maybe email the school administration. I mean, at Warwick, I just recently received a donation form for the library. And, I think it was probably pretty well received. It might even be better well received, and you probably get it from the librarian to say exactly how many people participated on this, ask for donation. But, there are certain things that really touch everybody. And sometimes there might have to be some type of economic incentive also from the school district to get people to fill out the forms. One example, and again, this is not something that might be implemented or might even be considered, but this is just an example. For example, the EPIC program, EPIC Read, after 3 o'clock, you don't have access to it. For the economically, disadvantaged, would they be able to have access by membership? And so if somebody was to fill out a form, to get access time, and of course that might cost money, and so that might have to be something to look at. But again, there might be different ways to look at the issue to get a better response.
Thank you for that. That's great. Absolutely. Anne?
Our classified staff will happily support trying to get this data. We did support this using our personal resources during COVID, using our own cell phones, calling families for the child nutrition department. But we need your help. Those of us who do not have students in the district know nothing about this. We can't help you if we don't know about it. So sharing things with staff so that we can help you, we can get it in our newsletters, use Peach Jar. We have Bright Arrow and robocalls. We have Campus Messenger through Infinite Campus. If it comes from the site and we can explain to families the impact on funding at the site, we can help you. But again, we can't help you if we don't know about it. Okay.
Thank you very much. We got great input. I appreciate it. And we can say something else, Anne, or? Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Rocha. Thank you, Ms. Pfeiffer, Associate Superintendent. Moving forward, I do want this to be an information central for us and for the community that we're representing here as we move forward in this work. So thank you. Next on the agenda, so part of our work is that to run an efficient meeting is that we also have officers to help with this work. And so we will have 3 positions to help. One is the chair to help to facilitate this meeting and to work with me and with Dr. Rocha. The other, and that's basically to just set the agenda and certainly run the meeting. The other is vice chair to substitute when the chair is not available. And then the other position is secretary, and that is to keep some minutes of our meeting. Again, of course, we're a Brown Act, so we need to be able to post minutes. And the next time we meet, we'll be able to review the minutes. I'm taking minutes now and the roll and all of that, so I'm able to add that information for the next time we meet. And so that's, we wanted to be able to have just a taste of what this meetings will be like. And as I said, the wonderful part about this is that there's a product at the end of this year that we will be moving forward as advisory to our board. And so I'll leave it at that and see if there's anyone who would like to volunteer as chair. I see Mr. Musto.
Yeah, I'm willing to serve. I've been a non-voting member of LCAAC for a couple of years, and I wrote a lot of the LCAP last year, so I'm pretty familiar with things and be happy to serve in either the chair or the vice chair position.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for chair? Yes, Diane, Trustee Jones. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
sorry, I know I cannot volunteer to have any of these positions, but I wanted to check because I know I was in a committee last night where the bylaws stipulated that those positions could only be held by voting members. I cannot remember exactly what the bylaws say here about who can serve in those positions, but I just want to make sure that we're checking the bylaws. And you know, it would be great. I just want to make sure that we're filling this according to the bylaws.
Yes, so voting members and non-voting members, I think it's silent on non-voting members, but just because I know my predecessor actually chaired this committee the year before last, right? And then last year we had a different chair. And so every year it changes. But my predecessor just couldn't vote. She just facilitated the meeting. So do I see a second for Mr. Musto as chair?
I'll second that. This is Chen.
Thank you. So a motion by Stephen Musto, a second by Chen. All those in favor?
Yes.
Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Musto. You are now chair. Wonderful. Thank you for volunteering. Now, vice chair. Would anybody like to nominate or self-nominate as vice chair? And this is the person that will, in the absence of Mr. Musto, will be able to facilitate the meeting. And this
Can I nominate someone?
Yes,
Sorry,
you
this
can.
is
Yeah, we'll see if they accept your nomination, but yes. You can.
I was wondering if there is a student member here who would like to be in a co-chair or vice chair role.
Oh, that's a wonderful idea. Would any of our any of the two students, Sion or Amanda, would you like to serve as vice chair?
Yeah, I think we're both interested. We're just talking right now to kind of figure it out.
Okay. Well, either of the two, we could do I don't think there's anything opposed to a co-vice chair, and then depending on that, we could do that. Would you both be open to that?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I feel like since we're from different high schools, kind of getting like perspectives from more and being able to like have more people to reach out to can be beneficial.
Wonderful, thank you. So with a motion made by Siddhartha to have a student member as the vice chair, and it looks like both Amanda and Zion have seconded that by accepting it. So all those in favor?
Yes.
Wonderful. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Motion passes. And now the special position. And I'm willing to do it if nobody wants to do it, but I really would love for someone that could help with as secretary. I know that oftentimes it can be difficult, and I would work to support that person with some very quick notes. The wonderful thing about this committee is that we also record and we post that. So our minutes can be, they don't have to be as detailed because we will have both documents up. And so that will be helpful. But would anyone love to be the secretary? For any nominations? And I know that Mr. Gardner, he was unable to make it. He was the secretary last year. And I don't know if he wanted to continue to do it. He did a wonderful job last year.
How often do we meet, Letty?
We meet once a month. Would you be willing to help us to be secretary?
I'll try. How's that?
I appreciate you. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Does anyone second that self-nomination? Oh, a lot of hands. I love it. Thank you. Thank you very much. So motion by Felix, and the second I'll go with Anne. I saw that hand go up first. All those in favor? Wonderful. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Wonderful. Congratulations. And thank you very much. I appreciate all of you for stepping up to do that. We know it's extra. And so really appreciate it. And I will help, I promise. So with that said, I'd like for you to take a look at the agenda. And in the agenda, I proposed some dates and I wanted you all to take a look to consider it. So as you know, we have many committees going on, and I know that a lot of you may participate in others. And so we took a look at what other committees were happening on the same night. And I don't know if any of you are members of the African American Parent Advisory. That does coincide with some of these meetings. So I wanted to put that out there for you all to think about. But we have proposed, we meet once a month, looking at the first Tuesday of the month. Is that correct, Christy, that we looked at? Or second? No, the first.
It was the first.
The first, thank you. The first Tuesday a month, except for October, because we just met and we're not going to meet next week. So we would meet October 12th. Then the next first Tuesday for November is November 2nd, December 7th, January 11th, February 1st, March 1st, April 5th, and May 3rd. And so that was there anyone that has just some big conflicts? Victoria.
Yeah, so I have two meetings that one meeting I might be able to make, and then one of them I know I cannot make. I don't know if it's allowed for myself to send a different FUTA representative if they're not appointed. Would that be okay?
Yes, I think.
Or I can just share the dates I cannot make.
Yeah.
I would hate for it to change it for everybody, but.
What date can you not make?
So March 1st, I will not be able to make for sure. And then December 7th is a maybe.
Okay.
And then I did want to point out that November 2nd is election day. So I don't know if that would, change our meeting. So I just wanted to point that out.
Okay. Is there anybody else that has some conflicts on here?
Sorry, this is Siddhartha. Can I ask on October? You mentioned second Tuesday?
Yes, we're looking at October 12th to meet.
Okay. I may not be able to attend that particular one.
Okay. Okay. Victoria?
So I just had one quick question. Will the meetings for the rest of the year be virtual?
Yes, so I do want to share that information. So there is new legislation around that. So for our next meeting, it will be virtual. And then we are now allowed to continue to have virtual. But as a committee, we would have to every 30 days, which would mean at the end of every meeting, we would have to make a decision is to continue virtual or to go in person. So right now, at least for the October meeting, we are proposing to continue virtual, and then because that's we still have some time there, but at the October 12th meeting, we would make a decision around. And so basically every 30 days, we would have to make that decision. What will be new that I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting is that we will then also by this next meeting move to live comment during public comments. And we will be able to do that virtually if we're virtually or if we're in person.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
Yes. Felix and then Yen Chen.
Eddie, could you briefly put these dates into the chat? I can't find them anywhere, and I'm desperately trying to keep up with your.
Yes. Oh, no, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes. And then Yen Chen, if you want to go, and then I'm typing.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea for the members to maybe look at the bylaws. Because what it really says is that 5 of the parent reps need to be available to have a quorum and 50% of the committee. Some of the committee members are the administration and staff and such. So it's almost every meeting we could actually make a quorum so things can get done. But we do need at least 5 of the parent reps to be available so to meet the quorum requirements. Get items done.
Thank you for that. That is true. Oh, thank you, Mr. Mooster, for typing it in. I appreciate that too. So why don't we do this? let's stay with the dates we have here. And I would agree with Yen, you're correct. And Victoria, what I can check on is that if we can get an alternate, if you'd like. But I think for the most part, it looks like the dates work for everybody else. For the most part, Siddhartha, we hate to miss you on one, but we totally understand. And that way we can just move forward with these dates. Because I will say this, there's so many other committees happening. It's going to be tough to find another date for some of these. Okay, perfect. Okay, so wonderful. So would somebody like to make a motion to accept these dates?
I make a motion to accept all these dates.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, so a second by Victoria, and the motion was made by, was it Anna?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, perfect. And all those in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Oh, wonderful. So we have our dates. And now the last piece of this is the 6 p.m. to 7:30. Just for you all to know, we were looking again at the meeting dates. So if you're all okay with this, the 6 p.m. to 7:30, and as Yen pointed out, as long as we have quorum, we'll get started. And today we had quorum, so we went ahead and got started. So we waited a few minutes, but if you're all okay with that, we're going to stick with the 6 to 7 p.m. and that gives people some time to grab a bite to eat as well. Felix?
I just wanted to point out that my son is in the Mandarin program, and the CIPCF parent organization has meetings the same evening that start at 6:30. I would most certainly prioritize this meeting over the other ones, but if there is any flexibility to move the meeting time of this, up by an hour, I looked at the calendar, and literally out of the 8 dates you posted, 7 conflict by or overlap by a little bit. Is there any flexibility with respect to timing?
So you're asking if could we move the meeting to say 5 to 6:30?
I'm not gonna.
No. Let's.
I'm only gonna ask very gently. I'm not asking the group to.
Yeah, no. I appreciate that. Is there any opposition to it being earlier, 5 to 6:30? Ooh, I think we're okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Trustee Jones had a meeting just prior to this one.
Yes, would this conflict a lot?
No, this was a one-off.
Okay. And I can say we're okay. If you would like to have dinner in front of you, especially because we're virtual, please munch away. That will be okay as well.
Yeah, I think if we stay virtual, it probably allows a lot more flexibility for people to get to the meeting or at least join. Meeting at the district office, I think there'll be some problems.
That's a very good point. Okay. Well, let's do this. Let's move it to 5 to 6:30. And because we will be considering a virtual option every 30 days after this next meeting, we can probably revisit there. It may be important to try to keep it pretty stable though, but just because we will want to make sure people are aware of it in the community that are watching. But I think for now, if I have no opposition, we're going to move the time to 5 to 6:30. Wonderful. Good.
I just want to say thank you. I'm sorry to speak out of turn. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
And I'm sorry, I want to make sure that I heard correctly. Are we starting at 5 or 5:30?
5. We will do 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. And then tomorrow morning we'll send out and we'll update the website as well tomorrow. Wonderful. Okay, wonderful. So I have nothing further on the agenda. Would anybody like to make a motion to close the meeting?
I'll make the motion to close the meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I can second that.
Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposition? Abstentions? Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Have a lovely evening, and we will update the website tomorrow and get that information out to all of you. Have a great night,
you.
everyone.
Good night.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.